Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, here we go. Now, I'd like to talk about an event that begins the next few weeks, actually. I'm talking about Pluto's entry into Aquarius for the final time, at least in this cycle. Now, I've talked about how this event is extremely very important, especially in my first two videos on Pluto's entry into Aquarius, part 1 and part 2. I left the third part until now because obviously it's a 3-stage process, and the last stage is going to begin once Pluto goes forward motion again on the 13th of October or thereabouts. Okay, it will finally make its entry into Aquarius for the last time in 200 or something years on the 19th of November or thereabouts. Okay, now what exactly does this mean? Well, to understand what this means as a continuation of the first two podcasts, you have to understand what Pluto means psychologically, and you have to understand what Aquarius means psychologically, because these are lights, and lights are terminologies used when trying to describe self-awareness or self-consciousness. Okay, that's why I call these planets functional lights, and I call the signs themselves, the archetypes, distributed lights. The archetypes themselves, they are archetypes of human understanding, and there are 12 of them. There's a reason why there are 12. They're very important because some people like to talk about 13 astrological signs and thereabouts, all these things. Well, unfortunately for them, that's not how it works. The number 12 is very important. Why? Because it is the duality of 6. When you have 2 6s, you have 12. That's really what it is. And so that 12 is talking about the structure of the circle, or the segmentation of the circle that is the plane of the ecliptic, because it's really telling you something about the way that the universe is organized. Because the entire solar system lies in a plane, so to speak. It's a plane because it evolved from a flat disk, just like the galaxy itself. The galaxy itself is planar in that sense, meaning that it's essentially a plane spiral disk, so that you can stand edge on to it and see it edge on it. That's what I mean, because obviously the flatness itself is defined by many thousands of light years. But you understand what I mean. So that flatness, in some sense, it's also part of human awareness. It's the way that everything is organized in that sense, because it's the same organizational strategy that you eventually experience in that self-awareness. I mean, your self-awareness is being generated by the way that biochemistry or biochemical molecules are organized in your brain. They build neurons build connections, etc. And your entire brain is organized according to the way that the universe is organized, the universe as it is organized in this part of space-time. That's what your brain basically is a reflection of that. It's not different, because if it were different, astrology would be meaningless. But it's not. Okay? And so these archetypes, these 12 archetypes, in religion you call them, in Judaism you call them 12 tribes. In Islam there's a 12thness of some, there's how it is defined as a 12thness of something. In Christianity it's called the 12 apostles or the 12 disciples or whatever. These are anthropomorphications, because at the end of the day, the only thing you're dealing with is a human mind and the stories that the human is telling itself. And where does the human get these stories from? That's the essence of what we're trying to discuss here. Okay, so if you want to understand it in greater detail, come join my classes. There's a promotion right now on. Come join my classes, because it doesn't stop at just understanding astrology. You have to understand the biochemistry of living memory. Because after all, what are you except a compact form of all your memories? You are literally carrying your memories around, meaning that you are carrying the representation of your self-experience. You're carrying it as you. That is what you are. Every time you reference yourself in the present, you are not referencing yourself in the present because there's no such thing. You are referencing your entire history as you carry them as your self-awareness, your memories. Okay? And these are the things that you project into the future. I've never really understood why people dismiss the past so much, If you're running away from your past, then it means that you're running away from yourself. There's something about your past that is you, because that is the extension into the future. Whatever future that you want to imagine, it is coming from that past. And that's why the past is always important. And you can see that as human beings, we are custodians of history. History gets handed to us so that we can hand it over to the next generation of human beings. What do you think this history is? It's a story. Now, what do you think happens when somebody decides to change the entire story, reformulate it, reformat it, and introduce a falsehood? Well, the person just creates a twist in their own consciousness, because the truth of what history is carried in your blood. It's carried in the way that your brain is organized. And there ain't a damn freaking thing that you can do about it. So if you decide to twist it and turn it into something else so you can call it something else, that is akin to looking at the sun and then deciding that everyone's going to agree that the sun doesn't exist. Well, the sun, you can feel its heat on your body, and its energy is what is responsible for growing your food that sustains you. So it doesn't matter what you really tell yourself. It doesn't matter what perspective you decide to take. Truth is something that cannot be denied in existence. It is what it is. And what it is what it will always be. Hence, the human experience is the search for that truth. Because in finding that truth, the human being becomes aware of what it is. Once the human being becomes aware of its own truth regarding what it is, the human being has come to know who God is. And that marriage is something that everything changes once that happens. Just like everything changed when human beings became self-aware. Once self-awareness connects itself to the trajectory that leads to the supreme intelligence of God, then things change also again. Okay? And that change, that connection, that marriage, that's where goodness comes from. Because goodness is not some type of moral edict. That's not the way that it works. It's not something that is imposed on a human. It's something that the human figures out, because within that goodness lies the greatest intelligence, the greatest comfort for the human. And the human is incentivized to follow it. I keep telling people, I say, look, the human mind is not designed for evil. It isn't, because evil nauseates the human mind, because it runs contrary to what the human really is. And I can prove this. You see, all you need to ask yourself is, why are you drawn to love? Why are you drawn to beauty? What is it about love? What is it about beauty that draws you in? You look at a beautiful woman or a very handsome man. Why? What's it that is drawing you in? Why would you prefer to go for someone who looks aesthetically pleasing than to go for someone who doesn't? Why do you choose certain types of pleasures? Why do you enjoy them? If you look at the behavior of the animals, they don't know what that is. And, a hungry dog or a hungry lion will eat from the ground directly, or will eat from a plate. It doesn't really care what difference this makes to it, because it doesn't make any difference. It simply cannot experience that level of reality because it's not self-aware. Okay? So that the human mind, the fact that you are self-aware, the fact that you're a human, simply what it means is that you are drawn to beauty. And where else do you find beauty? Where do you find beauty? Beauty is not found in religion because you don't know what it is. The stories in religion, you don't really know what they are. You accept them because your parents did, and accepting them made you part of a group, gave you some significance or relevance. But it doesn't give you conviction because you don't know what it is. Okay? So you hold it by faith, and then you elevate that faith as something to be proud of. You shouldn't be proud of it, because if you don't know what anything is, then you haven't really connected to it. The source of beauty for the human mind lies in the understanding of who God is. Meaning that you must study nature. You must study the reality that God has created. Why? Because within that reality, He has left you a bread trail. Crumbs. And as you follow those crumbs in understanding how reality is organized and put together, you are led to the supreme intelligence. That's the only place it comes from, because that is the understanding that you will use to create a good world. It will come as a byproduct of this journey. It wouldn't come because some guy somewhere dressed in some type of attire tells you that this is what you have to do. That's not the way that it works. Okay? And if you're in the 21st century, you ought to have figured it out by now. Okay? So, what is Aquarius? And I've talked about this across 2 podcasts, but Aquarius is a very important stage in the development of the human mind, because it represents the end of the perspective on physical reality. Once you go from Aquarius into Pisces, you have begun the process of transcending physical reality itself. You are no longer concerned with the physics of the way material things are organized or the way that they behave. You are now open to higher levels of story, higher levels of narrative that help you to touch higher levels of beauty. In fact, what the Piscean is really looking for is to self-transcend by touching and attaching itself to the highest possible beauty. And what that feels like, it feels like a negation, like self that just evaporates, something like that. Okay? So that you deny yourself in terms of its material desires, because you are aspiring towards something that you can perceive to be even higher than the mountaintop. And so some astrologers associate Pisces with self-sacrifice, But it's deeper than that. It's an instinct. And I have a lot of podcasts talking about the exact nature of Pisces. It goes very deep. It's the most beautiful thing that the human being can experience, because the Piscean narrative is really talking about the highest possible beauty that you can experience in this physical world. Okay? But Aquarius is just short of that. And Aquarius is still very material because it deals with the stage before self-transcendence becomes a thing. So, what does that really mean? Aquarius is the loftiest material story. Is extremely high because it must become high to the point where it can transcend into Pisces. It can begin a Piscean journey. It can become Pisces. So at the very last degree of Aquarius, what you're seeing is the highest possible experience of human loftiness, because Aquarius is the human ego. And what is the human ego? A human ego is a storyteller, the active storyteller. Prior to the emergence of the human ego, the story is being told unconsciously. All right. And so in Leo, the human ego emerges. It emerges as a form of significance, or the search for that significance, because the significance itself is the active part of the storytelling. And like I've told you, the human mind really is built to decipher the most beautiful stories in existence. That's what it's for. That's what you are. You are here on this earth to recognize who God is. That's the only reason why humanity exists. Because in that recognition, humanity is not recognizing something else. It is recognizing itself. Okay? And that's how God leads man forward. It's like being in the sky and drawing you in, hinting you that you can ascend, you can become better, you can transcend. Alright? And that's what the ego is. The ego is the vehicle that is used in this journey. Because ultimately, your realization must be something that empowers you. And it does so when you accept it as your own. If it is imposed on you, the human will rebel. Okay? So you have to be led. You have to be directed in a way that is more like a facilitation than an actual directive. Okay? And God does that by giving the human being self-awareness. Self-awareness is taking away something from the human so that the human being doesn't really know what it is anymore. It experiences the vacuum of self-knowledge. But within this vacuum, it must populate what it thinks of itself. Because with this comes the human being's innate ability not to see itself. You have eyes in front of your head. You never really look at yourself. So the only people who can really see you are others. And then you put the human in an environment with others. Well, if the human being hates the other, the human being will never know what it is. If the human being accepts the other, then the human being will know what it is, because it's the other that is looking at you and you are looking at the other. So that the only way you can truly understand who you are, what you are, is from that relationship with the other. That's where interpersonal relationships matter. Because there's no other really. You're just looking at yourself, just from a different point of view. So that a human being provides to you the context or the perspective within which you come to understand yourself. It's design. It's not random. It is essential to the journey that the human being is on. And that's why things like racism, the idea of human races, y'all don't even know how devastating this is. Because it is the evidence that the human being is experiencing the dimmest nature of human consciousness. That is, human consciousness has dimmed to the point where it's just like a candle when it has the potential to become a sun. Alright? And I have a podcast where I talk about that. I compare a candle to the sun. And the sun is not something that people really understand because we look at it in the sky, alright? Or we see it on TV or some magazines or some paper or whatever. No, you don't really know what the sun is. I can assure you that as a human mind on earth, you don't know what the sun is. Because your mind can't conceive of that type of thing. Because you have no direct experience of that. Okay? The sun is an overwhelming influence. It's huge. Massive. We don't even know, your mind cannot wrap around such a thing successfully. And its energy output is stupendous. In front of the sun, if you're gazing at the sun outside of the Earth's atmosphere, it's pure white. It's blazing hot. The corona that surrounds the sun is millions of degrees, so good luck with that. Alright? Now this overwhelming influence contains 99% of the mass of the entire solar system. It's truly humongous. And the sun is one of those astronomical bodies that is as close to a perfect black body as possible. Meaning its radiation profile has a very definite signature, telling you about the way that it is organized. Because it's a signature that comes from everything else also. Every radiating source in the universe tries to approximate the perfect black body signature. Alright? I have several podcasts where I talk about that. So it's very important. But this sun, the significance of it in astrology is that it represents the active storyteller. And that sun is the essence of Leo. So that in Leo, a human being feels this active nature of storytelling so profoundly, all right? So profoundly that they're left with a challenge. Because despite the fact that they can feel the immense nature of this solar aspect of themselves, well, that's confined within them. They want you to be able to feel it too. And that begins the journey of this narrative, the development of this narrative from Leo to Aquarius. And I've talked about how that journey, the most significant energetic aspect of that journey happens in Scorpio. It's not a coincidence. Because within Scorpio, you must retrieve some type of information regarding what you're going to try to discover in Aquarius, or what you want to present as the loftiest of your stories regarding your ego and the story it's telling. You are going to have to retrieve an essential part of that narrative from Scorpio. And that makes Scorpio one of the most powerful and enigmatic signs. Why? Well, because of deception. Because that information about yourself, you're going to have to retrieve it from the depth of another person. But who? Alright? So you need to figure that out. And ultimately, when you find where you are going to retrieve that, you will feel it as a very strong sexual connection. That's how it appears, but it's not sex per se. Sex is just a physical manifestation of it from a sensorial or experiencing point of view. What it is an affinity of some kind. It's like a gravity of some kind, right? Because the part of you that needs that knowledge of yourself that is stored in that person, that's what's recognizing itself. And you are drawn into certain types of relationships with those type of people because there's something about their own nature that you need to complete yourself. And that now becomes the narrative. So if you're lucky enough to find that type of connection and the retrieval process is such that it happens smoothly, then you have no idea what you have just discovered. You have discovered the answer to everything, really, to the human problem. Now, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. Now, I've just told you that in order to go from Leo to Aquarius, that Scorpio is what it really is, because Scorpio is the representation of the sexual stories that the human being is really telling. All our stories are sexual. All the physics of existence is sexual. That's really what it is, because sexuality is not really sexuality. That is our experience of it. What it really is something truly mind-boggling. You need to listen to my podcast on Paradise, The Infinite Ascent of Knowing, to be able to understand what sexuality really is. That is, prior to it being manifested as sexuality. It's something truly, truly beyond our human understanding. That's why we yearn for it. Because it's almost as if it's a way to touch or remember the divine. And divinity is not something that is sort of outside of it. It reminds us of home, where we come from, our origins. Okay? That's what's really hidden in Scorpio. And most people don't know this. That's why the pull is so strong. And it starts in the sign of Cancer. Alright? Because it is that sign of Cancer that births Leo, which now begins the active stage of storytelling until it gets to Scorpio. When it gets to Scorpio, an assessment is made regarding the sexual stories it is telling. Because those sexual stories, right, they are stories about self-knowledge. And if they're not the right one, what you're going to get is a disaster. A disaster. And that's why placements in Scorpio are very difficult. Because each placement, each functional light in Scorpio is telling a story of something that must happen in that Scorpio. And if it's not handled correctly, the result is literally the opposite of what it's supposed to be. It's a huge amount of fear, denial, betrayal, deceit, all these things. And they have life-changing consequences because of where they're contained in, or what they're contained in. Okay? Well, that's Pluto into Aquarius. Because Aquarius now, right, if you've listened to my first two podcasts on Pluto into Aquarius, Aquarius now is something more than just Pluto going into Aquarius. I mean, Pluto entering into Aquarius is significant because it happens only once in 240 something years. But it's more than that in this case. Why? Because the age of Pisces has ended. And the age of Aquarius begins with Pluto's entry into Aquarius. That's what you are looking at. And that's an event that occurs only once in 26,000 years. So the last time such a configuration was occurring, it was so long ago, human history is lost in terms of what was happening there. It's lost because the world was remade. The history of humanity was literally wiped clean. And all the archives and suppositories of knowledge, they were burnt down and looted. The idea was to create a new type of reality populated by lies. To reimagine a human being that doesn't know anything. A human being that doesn't have any idea what is going on with themselves and in the cosmos. The end stage of such a product is an empty human. An empty human is a disaster in nature. Why? Because a human is capable of elevating whatever it tells itself. The human will elevate it to the point where it becomes something else entirely. The empty human elevates evil because evil is a product of ignorance. Evil comes because you don't know what you're doing. What goodness does is that because it is built on knowledge, and this knowledge gets more beautiful as you approach the supreme intelligence. You will never get there because it's an infinite ascent, right? But it approximates paradise. And once your mind begins to open to that level and goodness begins to sit in the world as it sits in the human, then reality itself is transformed. And if you think this is just some mystical talk, imagine the type of transformation that has happened when human beings became aware of electromagnetic radiation, light, and all the patterns of light. Look at the type of reality people have created. All right? You think that pattern only existed when human beings discovered it. It's always been there. But look at the way it has transformed even the narratives the human is telling itself. Now, the idea of light is that it illuminates, and the illuminated human is a human that is tending towards goodness. But you don't have that in this case because light is only understood as an application to technology. Technology comes from the desire to dominate. I keep telling people, I say, look, some people imagine that the gun was invented as a form of human intelligence. Actually, it's not. Necessity is the mother of human invention. All right? The people who invented guns is because they needed to be able to kill people rapidly. The only reason why is because of theft. So you can rob them. You can terrorize them. You can impose something on them. Now, every human being that doesn't want to do this, you will never invent a gun because where's the necessity going to come from? You're not even going to imagine such a thing. All right. So it's not a feature of intelligence because after all, the Chinese had gunpowder for centuries. They didn't invent the gun. Once the British got their hands on that gunpowder technology, the world changed forever. Terrorism, global terrorism became the order of the day. And that story is still playing out because human beings must learn where those things lead to. And I can assure you that they don't lead to anything good. They are leading you to the worst aspects of Pluto in Aquarius. The kind of stories the kind of way that Pluto elevates sexual stories is extremely powerful. There's nothing quite as powerful in the human psyche. You can imagine the type of stories that Pluto currently holds right now that it wants to take into Aquarius. Black Africans built what you call the Nile Valley civilization based on an understanding that you cannot replicate today. It's not a boast, it's the truth. 6 million tons of block. Each block is unique in its weight, its size, and its cut, its shape. So you can't just arrange them any which way you can. You must arrange them according to a very specific pattern. Otherwise, you don't get a pyramid at the end of the day. And you must arrange them so precisely that you can cut a shaft from the inner chamber of it right out to the surface. Now, most people don't understand that the only way to configuratively arrange that is mind-boggling. The permutations, it's mind-boggling. Do you understand? Because you must encode within it all the secrets that you're trying to encode. And all the secrets in those monuments, they are secrets of cosmology, astronomy, physics, chemistry. You would say why? Because they want you to know who they are. And the reason why they want you to know who they are is because you are going to see them in a different state of consciousness. You are going to see them in a different state of awareness. But if you look at what they have expressed, knowing fully well that the way they have expressed it, you don't know how. You think it's a coincidence? You think those people are stupid? They didn't leave any detail regarding how they built it or why. And that simply means that you will only be able to identify with it when you come to understand what it is. And so it's a clock. It's a calendar of some kind. And it has been designed in that way to restrain you, because you're going to meet the same people who did that. You're going to meet them in a state of awareness or consciousness where they don't even know who they are anymore. They don't know anything about themselves. And you are now going to decide what you're going to do with them. Well, we all know how that story has turned out. The most brutal campaign in human history. The only thing worse than it is its denial. That's Pluto in Aquarius. Because denial, that's the thing that empowers Pluto. Because anything that you deny, especially if you consider it a taboo, then you suppress it deep inside your desire and you lock it in there. But it doesn't want to be there. And anything you take into that subterranean level, you energize it beyond anything you can imagine. And it's angry because it doesn't want to be there. Okay? You are oppressing it by suppressing it. Now, because it is connected to your sexual nature and your sexual story, then there's really nothing you can do to keep it down there. Because that sexual story really is all that there is. And the most elevated form of that story is what you find in Aquarius. And this is what the entry of Pluto into Aquarius, this is what it really is. It's a question regarding everything that has been buried in the psyche down there as a way of oppressing or suppressing human nature. Because what Pluto is really is that Scorpio. So that there is a truth about reality, or in this case about yourself, which you need to go and retrieve from another human being. And when you experience the connection to that truth, you experience it as an intense desire, sexual desire of some kind. And then it begins to condition the stories that you tell. Now, the thing about that desire is that the moment you begin to suppress it, then you create a lot of complications regarding the narrative. A lot. Because it's always trying to come out. The way to deal with it is to bring it into the light so that it doesn't have subterranean power. To address it. And usually, the reason why people suppress these things is because they are ashamed of those things. There's something about the experience that the human being is terrified of. That's what that Pluto represents. It represents the truth about yourself that you run away from. And by running away, you make it more powerful. Because Pluto deals with those scorpionic things, transformations, betrayal, death, all the sex, rape. It's basically sexual. But you know that the way that human beings experience sexuality, they experience it as the need for power. Alright? Because if you look at animals, their behavior changes when the female goes into heat. The behavior of the male changes. Alright? They become more aggressive. They begin to fight each other. You think it's a coincidence that every complex life form on this world is having sex? It's not a coincidence, because that sexual nature, that is the root upon which every life form is telling its story. Now, when you get to the human being, that sexual experience has now become self-aware. And the idea now is that it must elevate into the infinity of goodness, because that makes it extremely powerful. Alright? Because then the human can see God as good. But what the human is actually doing is seeing itself as good. And when the human being is convinced of its good nature, it can create life. It can create goodness. A human being that is the opposite of that, the internal, like the human being will go sterile. You become barren. I mean, look at all the fertility rates in the world. Don't you ask yourself what's going on? That's nature giving you basically a report card or whatever. This is the truth about your situation. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. That's your damn problem. It is the assessment of a nature that birthed you. A nature that created itself and assembled itself without your opinion, basically. What does your opinion matter? You are looking at the truth. And the truth is horrifying to look at because it spells mass extinction. Okay? And then you ask yourself, what exactly is worth this as a price? There's nothing. There's nothing on this earth worth extinction. Nothing. Okay? But that's that Pluto. Why? Because it has been denied. The physical manifestation of that denial process is oppression, suppression, and everything that you are forced on the ground. Every truth about reality that you are forced into pressure cookers or pressure pots or whatever. And then you deny the whole thing. What difference does it make if you deny the sun? What difference does it make? People who have experienced sexual obsession, if you've ever been sexually obsessed with someone, I mean in a healthy way, not a way that turns you into a stalker or some type of rapist or something like that, or an abuser, you realize that when you're really experiencing this, you can't ignore it. It's just, you can't do anything else. You can't function. This person is constantly on your mind. There's a connection there, very powerful. And if the person is feeling the same way, trust me, that is the recipe for creating life-changing experiences. You will experience a love like no other, and it will transform your reality. You will now understand the relationship between success and sex. It's a very powerful thing. Okay, and I have a podcast talking about that, Scorpio and sex. Very powerful podcast. You should go listen to it if you haven't. So, the major sexual story of the world, the way that it's sitting currently in the world. Remember, sex is power and all that, right? That is what is now being presented to Aquarius. But Aquarius is very lofty. The loftiness of Aquarius comes from it being able to find the loftiest, the most amazing, the most beautiful stories that allow it to begin to envisage the nature of Pisces. The thing that makes it lofty is the integrity behind what it knows. And integrity is a key word for people who have an ego or pride. Alright? So, in Aquarius, Leo wants to be recognized by people who are also significant like it. Because in Leo, you can tell Leo that, oh, you look very well, you dress very well. You can tell Leo things regarding their personal experience that literally makes them feel very joyful. It flatters them in that sense. You bring sunshine or warmth into their heart. In Aquarius, Leo needs more. Because it's not just content hearing that it is significant from others. No, it wants to hear it from those whom it considers to be significant. Because then that makes its sense of significance even greater. It's like if you're a neuroscientist in New York and people are telling you how amazing you are because of the work you do. It's great, but it's not quite as great as receiving recognition for your work from other neuroscientists who nominate you into that category. The joy and the satisfaction is even more immense in that sense. Okay? So there's something very honest, something very important and very lofty and significant about Aquarius. What Aquarius hopes to receive from Pluto is the truth. It can't have it any other way. Pluto must come with the truth of what things are as it is. And currently the way it's sitting in the world is that truth is an antithesis of what Aquarius is. Why? Because Aquarius is the quintessential nature of humanity. That's why the symbolism is that of a human. And what is the human doing? The human is sharing knowledge to the whole world. That knowledge is not the knowledge of chemistry. It's not even the knowledge of biology. It's the knowledge of the thing that generates all the other knowledges. It's the knowledge of self-consciousness. What it is. And simply what that means is that it is the knowledge of what humanity is. What humanity really, really is. And I've told you before, the moment you understand what humanity really, really is, you have understood who God is. Because the connection cannot be separated. They are one and the same in that sense. One understanding reveals the other. And then the matter is settled. It's not settled until some other discovery is made. No, it is settled forever. Now, the nature of that human being, that is Aquarius, the nature of Aquarius itself is the nature of blackness. And those who don't understand what I'm talking about, you need to go listen to my podcasts again. Those 3 6s, what do you think they mean? What do you think they mean? Because if you read my book or you've listened to my podcast, what they mean is they are talking about the way existence itself is organized. They're talking about the way that God built the universe. Because that way, that's what delivers the human. And God built the universe in a way that delivers the human. Because what God built is the human. Every other thing you see as the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, the laws of mathematics, whatever you want to call it, those are just different pathways for the realization of the human. The first human on this planet was by necessity black. It could only have evolved in the blackness of Africa. Whatever else that you think in your head is a lie. A provable lie. The same pattern is in the organization of your basic reality, everything. I'm talking about the way that material constituents are organized. In physics, it's a standard model of particle physics, whatever you want to call it. You find the same pattern there. It's the same reason why your brain is organized the way that it is. Without these 6s, you could not even listen to what I'm saying right now and understand it. You can't make any meaning of it. Meaning making itself is down to blackness. Humanity is down to blackness. Now, when I mean blackness, I'm talking about everybody. I don't give a damn what your epidemis is talking about or what narrative you have contrived regarding the nature of your epidemis. You are caught in a delusion. And the cost of that delusion is what that Pluto in Aquarius is coming to deliver. It's a delusional experience. And Pluto is the most explosive aspect of human nature. Ever wondered why the word Plutonic comes from it? Ever wonder why the material that is used to make nuclear weapons, it's called plutonium? Ever wondered why? And the biggest taboo, the biggest secret that has been suppressed and oppressed for so long is the significance of blackness. Because you have come to live in a reality where you are told that blackness is the most inferior thing, especially when it appears on a human. You say, oh, the black African is inferior, he's primitive, he's this, he's that. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have come to live in a contrived reality made up of falsehoods. And I can assure you that part of the Pluto in Aquarius process is that Pluto comes out. And because of the way that it comes out, it represents the most terrifying thing to you because you have suppressed it. What is coming out from Pluto entry into Aquarius is the significance of blackness. And it will change the entire world. Well, they call it a change. It's a correction. Why? Because you are living a lie. You are living a reality that is entirely made up of falsehoods. from your religion to every other narrative you have constructed in the last 4,000 years is all lies. And the only reason why you don't know it's a lie is because of terrorism. Do you know that terrorism is a Plutonic activity? Global terrorism. Because that's the only way that lie has been created. Global terrorism. It's the gun. Do you know that when you look at a pistol, because the first things that were invented were these pistols, right? Look at the shape of a pistol. It looks like the shape of Africa. Look at the shape of the pistol. It looks like the shape of a penis and balls. The male sexual organ. You think it's a coincidence? It's not. Because all those questions, they will be answered now that Pluto needs to go into Aquarius. They have to be answered because that's the question. That's the only question. And so what is put on trial is the narrative of blackness as it sits in the world. Because the narrative of sexuality also. Because it is the dysfunction that lies in the sexual story. That's what created the need to imagine or reimagine a false reality. Because the entire thing revolves around the sexuality of the black African man. His penis, his balls. That is what is being denied. So an entire reality was created to refabricate the narrative so that you can come to imagine that that's the most significant thing, because that is human life. That is life. That is humanity. If you negate it, you will go sterile. I can show you the physics that predicts this. That physics was created 10,500 years ago. It's precise. It's not the work of primitive people. They told you in very clear terms how reality is organized. They told the stories because they want to share with you, because that is the gift of knowledge. It is the gift of God. It is what guarantees humanity's success. And then a group of Meshuggahs arose and they buried it all because they want that power for themselves. They could not find themselves in the definition of that. So they sought to nullify it. How can you nullify existence, for crying out loud? Existence that you're participating in. The existence that is you. I mean, living things are literally made from carbon. What do you think carbon is? Because you call it carbon, you think somehow it's different from anything. It's blackness, pure and true. It is interacting with itself. That's why it is very efficient. And you need that level of efficiency to construct life. You can't build life from anything else. The cost will be too much. It cannot be sustainable. The only way to build sustainability is with blackness. Most people don't understand how self-awareness is generated in the head. They don't understand it. So you can imagine my shock when I meet people who tell me that because I'm a black African, my IQ is in the double digits or in the room temperature. Who the hell are these people? What are they talking about? Because they obviously don't know anything. And they're not really concerned about the fact that they don't know anything. They're really concerned about maintaining global terrorism. And simply what that means is that we don't care about the truth. We don't care about what we say is what must be, because I'm holding a gun to your head. So if you don't agree with me, I'll shoot you and I'll kill you. Well, there are responses for that too, because a human cannot change who God is. The entire prescription of the universe was laid down before the first human opened its eyes in awareness. God did not ask the human, what do you think I should do? How do you think I should build this? Everything was laid down and perfect before the first human opened its eyes, and God winked at it. If the human is not self-aware, it wouldn't recognize the wink. But the human did. Why? Because it's self-aware. And if you've listened to a couple of my podcasts, you understand that self-awareness is something that creeps in. It's not something that suddenly just appeared in the early human's head. That's not the way that it works. It came in gradually as moments of clarity. And those moments must have been terrifying. It's like waking up and finding yourself in the middle of the jungle. Obviously, you don't belong there. It's terrifying. And so the entire purpose of self-awareness is to move the human out of the environment of the animal and move the human into different environments that can be made safer, because the human is no longer an animal. And simply what I was telling you is that the human psyche can no longer entertain the narratives that animals tell themselves. But do you know what your modern day reality has been constructed to be? It's constructed to replicate the environment of the animal, wherein which humans hunt other humans for food. Do you realize what that is? You don't even understand what is coming, what is already here. Because whether the human likes it or not, the human must change. It will change or it will be destroyed. I'm not talking of all humans. I'm not. Okay? Once you are in the grip of the narratives of white supremacy, you will be destroyed. It's not because I said so. It's because that's what it is. I'm saying so. The fact that I recognize it is meant to be alarming, because I do not recognize it as some type of religious tale. I'm not reading you from the book of Revelation. No, I'm telling you that if you want to understand the exact physics behind these conclusions, come join my classes. Come and listen to the physics of the biochemistry of living memory. And I will use your peer-reviewed science to demonstrate the reason to you why you should be very terrified. Of course, it is not my aim to alarm anybody, but I'm like someone who's looking at the rest of the world in pure alarm. I'm looking at it all and I'm terrified because I don't understand what can be worth this. What type of story must the human being be telling himself in order to regard this as beneficial? The human is clueless. And so you are in the midst of the deepest possible human ignorance. But Pluto in Aquarius does not care. If you're ignorant, it's your problem, it's your business. Because that's not the way that your brain functions. Your brain does not function to make you ignorant. The normal functioning of your brain, what it does is that it increases your self-awareness. You don't even have to do anything. You just have to interact with your environment. The rules underlying that environment, they contain the wisdom of the supreme intelligence. So by interacting with them, you are coupled to them. You begin to become them. You begin to internalize those rules. You begin to understand how nature works, how reality works, how humans work. And for those who think that human reality has no rules, that you need to be given rules from religion, this is bunk. There's no religion. There's no separate type of reality called a religion. It doesn't exist. All right. What you have is a continuation of physics. The same physics that made you human, made you self-aware. That's the same physics that is continuing as the stories that you are telling yourself. What else can they be? Their job is to lead you to God. The same God who created the reality in the first place that you are experiencing. He wants you to discover the physics. He wants you to discover how it works. Because only by discovering it will you become it. And as you become it, you are being led to Him. And that moment of being led to Him, that moment is a magical moment when you discover. And I tell you, in the biochemistry of living memory, I tell you that that discovery was already made thousands of years ago. It was made thousands. The significance of blackness was already something that was settled across all humanity many, many thousands of years ago. All right? There was no debate. It was clear, just like anything else that you prove today is clear, right? And then in some act of who knows what you're going to call this, some Meshuggahs got together and decided that they were going to upend all of this. Well, unlike today where you can find a business or an industry created and owned by people, God is the owner of reality. God is the owner of all the rules of reality, the way that reality works. And He has patterned it after His likeness. Now, it may sound like a symbolic statement, but you really need to understand the principles of organized complexity. The 3 sixes. Once you understand this, you know that what you're looking at is the core. I call it the core in some circumstances because it is the thing that sits at the root of everything. It doesn't move. And yet everything that is expressed as it. And when it wants to build life, it needs the most efficient system that is possible. Well, if you are the most sophisticated thing and you want to build something equally sophisticated, well, the only thing you can do is use yourself as a reference. And that's exactly what happens. So nature realizes carbon that is made up of 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. But that's not just what it is, because each of the protons are made up of 3 quarks. All right? So that when you have a proton and a neutron, what you're really looking at is a 6. So you have these 6lets, each proton with its neutron, all the way down. You think it's a coincidence? Because that's the structure you need to build the most efficient forms, because they have to become alive. And life is the sustenance of that efficiency at the lowest possible cost. It's even worse when you need to build self-aware life. You now need to accelerate the biochemistry even more. The only way nature does it is with those same 6s, with that same blackness. And then somebody invents a reality system that looks at blackness as an inferior thing. Are you crazy? Are you crazy? Do you realize that? Let me say this because I haven't said this anywhere else. Do you realize that when conception takes place in the womb and a baby is forming in the womb, that baby is following the exact same process that the universe followed in order to become what it is today? Do you realize that? I'm not stating it as some type of speculative thing. I'm stating it as a matter of fact. You can quote me anywhere because I have proven this. The fact that you don't know about it, that's down to the reality that you are living in. A reality made from lies. That baby developing, and you were once that baby. the listener, you who listen to this, you were once that baby in the womb and you were not self-aware. You were being put together by the very same principles that you now deny as an existence. If you don't know what the recipes for infertility are, come and I will show you. I will show you in the biochemistry of living memory. I will show you how those things are not different from that same biochemistry. Because whatever it is that you think or imagine in your head, you must represent it as biochemical processes in your brain. You must represent it as part of yourself. So if you think that you are destroying others, you are destroying yourself. You think that your denial or your lies is hurting others. Well, the person you're hurting the most is yourself. And Pluto in Aquarius is going to demonstrate this. You are about to experience something that is almost unbelievable to define as the next 20 years. Because you are going to watch as the world changes completely. Completely. Because however you want to look at the dynamics, because you might think that people are in control because they have the ability to globally terrorize the entire world. They have the ability to launch nuclear weapons. They have the ability to hold a gun to every man, woman, and child. And you think that they're strong, they're in power. They have no power. They're not strong anything. They're not in control of anything. And you are going to witness that. You will witness that for everybody who survives this. You will witness that that is not power. Because you are going to see power. You are going to witness what power really is. And it will shock you. It will change you right from your core. It will change you because it will remind you of what truth really is. Alright? And that is the experience that is waiting for the world. Starting from the 19th of November, things are going to get heavy. It even starts from the 13th of October, thereabouts, when the forward motion of Pluto is triggered. Because once that forward motion is in effect, it means that the entry of Pluto into Aquarius is imminent. And so preparations begin. You have to tie that to what is happening in your world right now. Because they're not different things. Okay? They're not different things. And I will remind you once again of what is causing everything. It's denial. And what is being denied is the physics of blackness. Blackness itself. Now, if you think that this is just some type of random discovery, no. The people who have been doing this, they've been preparing for this moment for a long time. They wrote you your book of Revelations. Where do you think all that came from? Most of it is around nonsense. But it's a weaponization to build an army against the truth. To oppose the truth. As if that is a thing. As if that is even possible. When I say that humanity is currently in the dimmest stage possible, it's because of things like that. The idea that you can actually be in opposition to God. It's impossible. This is ridiculous. Who spends time on these things? I make reference to a lot of Torah narratives and people often ask me if I'm a Jew. I've told you, I said your modern reality is a lie. All of it is completely made up. And the fact that you don't know this is your problem. Because the reality as it is, it didn't go anywhere. It's always been there. Now, all that God is doing is just to make it more noticeable. That's all. Because it's time for something else. Because Aquarius is something that must be realized. It must. There's no choice. That's why I said all those people that think they're very powerful because they have weapons, they don't even know anything. There's no power beyond the power of God. There's nothing that can even be in opposition. It cannot be. Listen, if God needs to create an opposition, He has to create that opposition and build it up. He has to build it up to its capacity or its strength or its whatever and give it the ability to act in some type of opposing way. And the only reason why God does that is because you need that conviction to change so that He will build that opposition and that power up to whatever level that is needed for your conviction so that He can destroy it. And He will destroy it with a feather. He will show you that, you see all this power, I will bring it down with a feather. And that will transform you. Because otherwise, how will you change? How will you understand? You can't. So that process is not necessary. But the way that your conviction as a person is sitting, you demand that as evidence. And whatever the human being is demanding as evidence in order to transition into Aquarius, that is what God is going to supply. Because the transition is already done. It's already complete. And it's already good. Alright? What you think of that, that's your problem. It's already done. The universe is not something that is waiting or in the process. That's the perspective from self-awareness, because we experience self-awareness as something that there is no outside to it. Okay? But from the perspective of God, the supreme intelligence, existence itself is complete, done and dusted. You were told that, and God looked at it and He saw that it was good. These are not just narratives. In fact, if you truly understand the first line, that is Genesis 1 verse 1. If you knew what it meant, you can close the entire book. You can close it because it contains all the information that you hope to realize. It's there in one sentence. All right. I'll probably have a podcast on that soon. Or maybe I have already. I don't know. It blurs after a while. After a while, I make so many of these recordings and I choose to publish only just very little of it. Maybe one day I'll create some type of archive where I put all my recordings. Listen at your own risk. Because there's some things that I haven't said publicly. Okay? So the people who wrote your book of Revelation, who put it together, they knew that this day was coming. They knew that this moment in time was coming. How do you think they knew? You think it's some type of prophecy? Nah. It's physics. Alright? If you pull a pendulum to one extreme and you leave it, it immediately searches for the other extreme. As part of what it does. That's the physics in a gravitational potential. A gravitational well. Okay? That's what it is. So they knew that this time was coming because deception, it's impossible to deceive God. It's impossible. And what that simply means is that it is impossible to deceive yourself, truly. It really is impossible. You can tell yourself whatever stories that you want. You can narrate things whichever way that you want. You can make them sit in whatever way that you want. But that's your problem. Because that thing that you have done, it exists only in you as you. And it represents a handicap. It cannot be an advantage. Because your brain is not organized that way. Your brain is organized according to a very precise physics, alright? So precise. Everything literally tries to be exactly where it is. And it needs to do so at the cheapest possible energy in order to deliver that function of self-awareness. That's it. It doesn't do so at the expense of anything else, really. You have to understand that the way that the supreme intelligence imagines reality, it's something we have lost in the modern age. And that's what's creating all the problems. Because we don't understand the nature of balance. We tend to think of it as balancing things and all that. It's more than that. If you look at the 5 principles of organized complexity, it's 3 sixes in 3 different directions. It is telling you of a balance. And that balance is in everything. That balance is the reason why you exist. And so when humanity, in some stage of its consciousness, when it evolves a narrative that is unbalanced, so what? The moment everything else in existence notices that it is unbalanced, they react to the unbalance. And the reaction is always the same. The unbalance or the imbalance needs to clear out. It needs to be brought back to equilibrium. And this is not dependent on what anybody is thinking or what anybody is feeling. Alright? We are like theaters of experience conjured up into existence. But we're like dust in the wind, really. Because we don't really exist. Human self-consciousness is something that is put together. You can see the way it's put together. You have a physical body. You have a brain in your head. It's putting together your sense of self. If you take that away, that sense of self disappears. Alright? So really, what are you? What makes you think that you can change reality and then introduce a pursuit of white supremacy? What the hell is that even supposed to mean? Are you going to negate the way that you are made? Are you going to negate the way that you are generating your consciousness? So what exactly does it mean? No, you are going to create a global economic system where you can put every black human being in chains, in bondage, or you can wipe them out of existence. And that gives you white supremacy? It doesn't, obviously. It just gives you an insane creature who has destroyed himself. That's all. Because it won't change anything. It doesn't change anything. The physics underlying it all doesn't change. That physics is what is responsible for life. It doesn't change. If you like, you can put all the black people you want in concentration camps and torture them for centuries and then come out and say, okay, this is an IQ test. They score the lowest, so they're the dumbest. What difference does it make? That is like a band-aid for you because you're dealing with your own crisis in your head. But it doesn't change anything. Blackness will always remain the way that everything in existence is organized for life, including you. When you search the truth of this universe in any direction, at any location in space-time, you will come to the same realization. Doesn't matter what you do. But if you decide to do those things because obviously you're trying to make something that is impossible to become normal, then you will incur a greater cost. And the moment you begin to incur cost above the average and normal in nature, you have started to send alarm bells to everything. And everything must respond. Because the entire point of the balance of nature is that you must find the solution that is good. And that means that everything must be at its best at the least possible cost. And the way that you know that it's at its best is that it is good for everything. It's not just good for a tiny little section and then it is opposing every other section. No, anything that behaves like that, it gets eliminated. Because if you have your body cells or your living tissue behaving like that, that's what a cancer is. It must be good for everything. Because it must integrate with everything. It must talk to everything. So what God will do is he will break down your modern society, your nations, your countries, because they're all evil. He will break down the notions of everything that you think your modern reality is based on. He will destroy them. And if you hold on to it, he will destroy you too. Because there are no countries. And the most blessed part of this earth is in Africa. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you say. It birthed humanity. God could have birthed it anywhere. He birthed it there because of the conditions of what humanity must mean. It's not down to somebody's whims and caprices or somebody's ability to globally terrorize you. You will only destroy yourself. You destroy yourself in a way that is irreparable. What is the point of assimilating a fortune if there's nobody to spend it, nobody to enjoy it? What is the point? Well, that sounds very theoretical. This is not. It's telling you that you will amass by gathering in the most horrific way that you can imagine. But it will all be enjoyed by others. It's not a curse. It's telling you of a consequence. Consequences contain the ways that things are built, the mechanisms. Like when God asked Adam to leave the garden. I hope you understand that these narratives are not real historical narratives. They are anthropomorphications. When God asked Adam to leave the Garden of Eden, and because of that, Eve must now bear pain in childbirth. Well, that's because now you're a physical being and you have human beings with large brains. That's what creates the pain of childbirth. A large head compared to the rest of the body. And why? Why is that the case? It's because the human is not an infant. But because of the exit from paradise, which simply means that you have forgotten about paradise. You know, people can't find their way back into paradise because they don't know what it is. How can you find what you don't know? And the way is made more difficult by evil, because evil is the deepest of ignorance. So you become even more lost. The human is not an infant. Alright? The human experiences infancy right now because of a condition. And by the time all of this is done, all those conditions will be reversed. Because the entire purpose, I'm not saying, it's not a causative factor. I mean, it's a sign, okay? The fact that you see a sign saying supermarket doesn't mean that that sign is the supermarket. It's not. These are guide stones. They are breadcrumbs. Because like I've said, can you imagine a supreme intelligence talking to you? You wouldn't understand anything. I mean, people talk about a person who is just a little bit smarter than you are. The person can speak in ways that you don't even understand what they're saying. Not to talk of a supreme intelligence. I mean, people think of aliens, saying, oh, aliens may have the ability to travel across space-time. They come here. How do we understand them? We're talking of a supreme intelligence here. The entire universe is manifested by that supreme intelligence. So, understanding what? No. You have to be guided. And you must be guided the same way you would guide a little child. Step by step, piece by piece. And as you embark on the journey, your mind is designed to gather or to accelerate in incremental stages so that you become aware of things that expand your thinking and your awareness to the point where you can now appreciate who God is. Because that changes everything, like I've said. And it's not the first time it has happened. A lot of racists try to imagine that they are just the latest iteration of a barbarism that has always been the case with humanity. It's a lie. Thieves like to justify the fact that everybody too can steal. Everybody's a thief. Killers also try to do the same thing because they're wrestling with their own demons, and wrestling with their demons is not your problem. You didn't put those demons there. They chose those demons, and once those demons appear in the psyche, they are not going anywhere. It's why I wonder why people deny anything. What are you denying? Can you deny yourself? Once you resurrect those demons, once you bring them out, they're with you forever. The only way to take them back is teshuva. You must repent. And it has a very well-defined process. It's not the, oh, please forgive me for I have sinned. What the hell does that mean? If you break something, repair it. If you have offended someone, amend the relationship. Apologize. If you have stolen something, take it and give it back. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. And if such a thing is no longer possible, then there are other ways. You're trying to generate conviction. Conviction is not something that you can deceive or you can fraudulently enact. This is ridiculous. Now, whatever you think of the truth of the world, well, welcome to the Truman Show. Because the next 20 years, they're going to demonstrate to you what that truth is. And you can judge for yourself.